What's going on, guys? It's your favorite first wave feminist. Um, and yeah, today I wanted to talk about the Guatemalan feminist you've probably never heard of. Now, I just want to be upfront. I'm probably gonna be very biased because this person is um this person is part of my family. Um, she is one of my great grandmothers. And that would be Vicenta Laparra de la Cerda or La Parra Reyes. Um, as her maiden name was known, and yeah, she was a Guatemalan feminist born in uh Quetzaltenango slash Shela. Um, and I already made a video about her life, so I'm not gonna go too much into it, but one of her parents unfortunately passed away, and she went to go live with other family members in Chiapas. And at that time, Chiapas was disputed territory between Mexico and Guatemala. I mean, technically, the dispute is gone. It's been settled for a few hundred years, I think, at this point. But like, for example, my parents, and I think this is a consequence of their like education in Guatemala, still think that it Chiapas belongs to Guatemala alongside, Belize and I think some of the more hardline ones will even say El Salvador too should. But that's kind of crazy because at one point all of Central America was considered Guatemala. um anyway, uh so yeah, then in 1851 she would have been about 20 because she was born in 1831. She went back to Guatemala and she met a Spaniard, or I guess a criollo, technically a Guatemalan born Spaniard named Francisco de la Cerda, I believe. And they got married. And as you do in that time when you're a poor Latina mestiza woman, um she was able to move up in society, and they had kids, and round about her 40th, maybe 39, 40th, she had what I believe was her final pregnancy, and during that final pregnancy, from complications of it, no one really remembers. My family does not remember um how exactly it went, but she was somehow paralyzed and she was disabled for I believe the rest of her life. Um and yeah, but that didn't stop her from being a feminist and advocating for women's rights, um, disabled women's rights, which not even a lot of people now really care about. So that shows you how ahead of her time she was. And eventually in I believe 1885 or 1886, she started the first um newspaper in Guatemala, um run by women. She did it alongside her sister Jesus Laparra, and um yeah, she called it La Voz de la Mujer, the woman's voice. And unfortunately, although it was ahead of its time and talked about women's issues and was kind of, I don't know, the book that I read the newspapers from, compiled by distant members of my family, um calls it proto feminist sometimes, but man, like I'm telling you, it seems to be pretty clearly um set within the framework of like a liberal or progressive first wave feminism. Like, um, in the sense that they talk a lot about like keeping women virtuous and that they deserve rights because they are the ones that take care of children and stuff like that and are the moral tethers of the household and whatnot. Um, and so, yeah, that's basically, as I've talked about before, the cult of true womanhood, right? That was the basis by which feminists in that time um advocated for themselves and their rights. So yeah, the actual content of the newspaper, it only ran for 5 weeks, unfortunately, because um it was actually pretty popular, but the problem was that people weren't um paying their subscriptions. There were even quite a few soy boy I mean sorry men that were subscribed to the newspaper. Um and yeah, it was, I mean, there were columns, like I said, about women's issues, about virtue, about child rearing and rights and stuff, but there were also stories and poems written by my grandmother and my aunt. Um, and you know what's funny? My one of my uncles, one of her kids, I guess that would be my two or three times great uncle, or my two times great uncle, because he was the brother of my two times great grandmother, one of her daughters. He was the only male contributor to the magazine. He contributed some poetry to each issue, I believe. But I know like I just find that cute. Like um like I imagine him going up to her and being like, "Hey mom, do you mind if I like be a part of your newspaper?" Probably was around 18 or 19 at the time. And I don't know, I find that wholesome. Uh So yeah, it didn't last long though. It didn't last long though, but then about a year later, 1887, I believe, she started another um again literary feminist newspaper called El Ideal, the Ideal. And that one ran for much longer. It ran for 20 weeks, and it was um extremely similar to La Voz de la Mujer, the woman's voice. And uh yeah, man, what can I say? The thing that struck me about both newspapers, honestly, is just how similar a lot of the arguments still are. And to be honest, when I say that, I'm not sure if I've like I should like that's a good thing or not because this was like 140 years ago almost. But yeah, like for example, there's one uh column. I forget exactly in which newspaper it was in, but there's one column where she's literally like, en pleno siglo XIX hay hombres que todavía creen que las mujeres nada más son muebles de lujo and which means there are men today in the middle or well into the 19th century that still think that women are simply fancy furniture. And like I don't know, like that uh that seems really modern in terms of rhetoric. Like you still hear that today, maybe on Twitter and stuff like that, and or in a blog, but not in a or even a YouTube video, but not in a newspaper, right? So like yeah, that also shows you that when guys use the term modern woman, uh it's kind of a dog whistle to be honest, because like I mean smart women have pretty much always been like this. You don't have to like it. I sometimes don't for sure. Um, but yeah, it turns out that modern women aren't so different from 19th century women, and I would say unfortunately they're still fighting the good fight with the same rhetoric, but also there was a ton of advocacy for poor women and disabled women, which um like I mean what can I say, like once again that's very much in line with first wave progressive feminism or liberal feminism. And but like I will say that I do think, especially considering that um Vicenta Mamachenta, as we call her in my family, being in a wheelchair did mean that they paid more attention to disabled people, not just disabled um women, because they were also very pacifist. Like they said, want our brothers and husbands and male friends to go off to get unalived. And if you know anything about the history of the region at that time, that's a pretty bold thing to publish. Considering that like Latin America at that time was getting into stuff every 2 seconds. Like, uh, but yeah, they really speak on training la joven proletaria, the young proletarian woman. They talk about that a lot, and keep in mind these are like, you know, for the most part, although it's interesting because a lot of the articles suggest that Mama Chenta was kind of destitute at this point. Um, uh, but they say like we need to train women for jobs, especially women that are widows and their husbands have left them. Like they need industrial training, they need uh an education. It's good for them to be educated so that they can raise good men and good women. And yeah, even in other stuff though, because Chenta was also, she spearheaded a lot of the efforts to um found Guatemala's national theater, El Teatro Nacional. I think it might be called El Teatro Colón now. I'm not sure, but in one of her articles stressing the importance of that and for people to give their money towards it, she was um like it helps paralytics. Music is good for paralytics, as they said back then. And she put in parentheses like eso lo sabemos de experiencia and stuff like that. We know that from experience. And I'm like, again, just like, okay, go off. Disabled queen. But no, it was just so funny to read stuff like that. And yeah, like I said, the it lasted for 20 issues. Um, People still weren't paying their subscriptions, and like, at this point, the publisher, since they were personal friends, um, with my three times great grandmother, and I'm pretty sure the wife of the publisher, maybe, I'm not sure, was part of the editorial board of the new newspaper. So they were kind of just doing it because once again my grandmother had, her living standard had really declined, and they really respected her as a poet and as a writer and as a feminist. And so they were like, yeah, we'll keep this going until it's absolutely not financially viable. And that came 20 weeks later, um, in around, I believe, excuse me, late, mid to late 1888. Um, and now I want to talk about the bad stuff. Or I'm not saying necessarily bad, just the stuff that I guess is kind of problematic in consideration uh of of the way we feel today, maybe, right? And that's that like a lot of progressive women back then, or progressive people in general, not just women, but you saw it kind of big time with women also, is that they were very much into the notion of progress and civilization. And you know, my three times great grandmother, Mama Chenta, was a Ladina. That meant that she was culturally assimilated and um racially mixed, but her cultural assimilation meant that she thought, and she was also a teacher. Like, I think um she taught at el Colegio Nacional de Señoritas in Costa Rica at one point as well. So like, um she educated young women in a European style. She thought that indigenous people should do the same. Um, and if they didn't, they were quote unquote less civilized, or you know, um, not not progressing. And of course, we don't have those beliefs now, but she did. And you know, yes, it's to be expected, but it's not exactly okay. Um, so that's kind of the only thing um that was really negative about it. Um, and I mean, yeah, guys, what can I say? Like, um, on a personal level, right? This is a member of my family. Like, her daughter was one of my great grandfather's mothers. So like, and I'm disabled. I'm in a wheelchair just like she was, and I write and I'm educated, and you know, just you don't know how it feels to be able to have a woman, or any person really, but especially a woman that was in a similar situation to me, um and to see all the great things she did. Um and um like, I don't use the term or throw around the term inspiration a lot. I think it's kind of cringe, especially for disabled people, but I can definitely say that I consider her one of my inspirations, and I'm so proud to be descended from her. I'm so proud to like know that she did a lot of good stuff for women, for disabled women too, for disabled Latino women, and and like, I don't know, like, she's part of what gives me personally life fuel. Like, and I'm just so grateful. I'm so astounded, and like, that's why I'm making this video, to try to keep her legacy alive in the world's lingua franca, which is English, because there really aren't a lot of resources out there about her in English. Um and finally, I just want to show The book is pretty rare. It was published around 11 years ago by um as I said, a um association devoted to her memory, headed by my distant family, but this is what it looks like. Shout out to my sister-in-law Beatriz for finding this for me because I had been looking for it for like 6 years. And yeah, yeah, you'll be happy to know that Mama Chenta um had a long life of 74 years. She passed away in 1905. I believe my great grandfather at that time was 3 to 5 years old, so she didn't really, or he didn't really get to meet her, but you know, um, obviously we kept her memory alive in my family through stories, the stories that my great grandfather told my father, and then which my father told uh my siblings and I. So yeah, I just go out there, support your fellow disabled men, women, Latino, Latinas, especially right now, guys. Thank you very much for listening. Bye.